Friday, March 1st. We've got a bunch of data which was delayed by the shutdown. The shutdown itself may have had some unusual effects on the economy. So some of the data pattern is a little jumbled. There's nothing in it that really says recession. There's nothing in it that says that we're going to take off. For the most part, it just confirms that the Fed's on the right page with an open-ended pause. There are some forward-looking analyses. The Atlanta Fed began maybe 4 or 5 years ago to publish the Atlanta Fed GDP tracker. And you can Google it. It's appended to the newsletter near this video. And the Atlanta Fed said that the fourth quarter GDP was only going to be maybe 1.8%. We got the official one yesterday at 2.6. Who's right? The Atlanta Fed and other forecasters are now out with the first quarter GDP 2019 near zero, so somewhere under 1. Again, good reason for the Fed to pause, no particular alarm. So the newsletter nearby, in terrible detail, takes apart the Fed's only real issue today. The usual suspects are out hammering at debt and the world's going to come to an end and that. It's not. The Fed's issue today is how to come out of emergency stimulus to rescue the economy and then identify a sort of a neutral place to pause, so as not overstimulating and at the same time while coming out not to unnecessarily slow the economy down. They're past the first stage of that decision, but what you ought to know are the Fed's tools. And the issue is inflation. It's not stability, it's not the banking system, we're past all of that. What can the Fed use as a predictive tool for inflation? The most traditional one is called the Phillips curve, which is the lower the unemployment rate, the more employers may compete to pay higher wages to workers, which can start inflation. That theory looks to be completely obsolete. There are some other monetary ones, old-fashioned central banking, they don't work either. There are old tests involving productivity, which look like cosmologists' dark energy, in that we think it's there but we can't find it. Boil all the way down, the Fed today has really only one tool that looks forward, and it's called expectations. And it comes in 3 pieces. One form of expectation are fancy financial market charts. They can be circular. They have a tendency to do something that doesn't have anything to do with inflation, even though they ought to work. This would be the shape of the yield curve, or the spread between Treasury inflation-protected securities and fixed-rate ones. It'll work. Another expectations theory goes to surveys of the public. University of Michigan is the leading one. I have great faith that marketing people can survey the public and decide what kinds of cars to build. I have no faith in surveying the public about inflation. Yet expectations, I've lived long enough to have seen them in play. In the 1970s, when inflation took off, everyone demanded a raise so that they could pay higher prices. Every business bought things, goods and services both, before prices went up again. But those expectations are effect of inflation in place. They're not a cause of future inflation. I mean, everybody hustling to buy things presumably, could prolong inflation, but that's not what started it in the first place. So what does the Fed have as a leading indicator of inflation? Right, it doesn't. All that it has is the ability to look out the window. In the 1970s, which is the classic last war inflation, which ran completely out of control. Inflation went from very low to 1% a month in the 1970s. In the 1970s, the U.S. labor had little overseas labor competition. The rest of the world was still trying to get over World War II. The supply and consumption of energy was inelastic to demand. That is, the price could go up, but we couldn't stop using the stuff because we were driving 8-mile to the gallon cars, and we hadn't invented the technology that would lead to greater energy production. We, in the 1970s also, the ability to substitute a cheaper product made in China for a more expensive one that was going up in an inflationary spiral here, it's impossible. It took years to accomplish that kind of substitution. So we don't have any of that stuff today. We also had a huge underpricing of credit because of old banking system regulations that dated back to the Great Depression that had become obsolete. So if you look out the window, we've got a modern economy that's the polar opposite of the old one. So if you're looking for a list of things to worry about, don't put inflation on it. This isn't the 1970s. The whole fool world has gone from being vulnerable to inflation, central banks constantly working against it, to the world becoming resistant to inflation, and the primary problem in places like Europe and Japan is how to get it going. So sleep well this weekend. Enjoy spring. Thank you.